I recently compiled a list of what I think are the greatest movies of all time. It's not a short list. I believe it has somewhere around 250 titles, listed alphabetically. And what I thought I'd do is, not discuss each one in great detail because that would take a long time. But I do think that I will maybe go through some of the titles on my list and invite comments or discussions about the movies that I put on my list. Since it should be obvious, I've watched a lot of movies. I have a love affair with movies, really. I became obsessed with them when I was about 5-6 years old. The first movie I fell in love with was The Wizard of Oz, which completely enthralled me and still enthralls me even today as an adult. But I thought I'd maybe go through the A's and B's of my list, and then in other videos until I read the whole list to you. And as I said, I welcome comments, criticisms, thoughts, and opinions from other movie lovers who watch this video. So without further ado, I did them all alphabetically. I just wrote them down randomly and then reorganized them to something that would be a lot easier to read. So the very first film I have on my list in the A's is Adam's Rib, which is a Katharine Hepburn Spencer Tracy movie from 1949. Followed by The African Queen, a great Humphrey Bogart movie from 1951, directed by John Huston. Followed by a German film from Werner Herzog, Ager, the Wrath of God, which is essentially about the fall of the Incan Empire. A very beguiling film, if I must say so. Followed by Sergei Eisenstein's Alexander Nevsky, which is Russian, obviously. Then I have a film by Fassbinder, Ali Fear Eats the Soul. Followed by All About Eve, one of Bette Davis's best movies. All Quiet on the Western Front, which I think is probably one of the greatest war movies ever made. After that we have Amadeus, about the great composer Mozart, with F. Murray Abraham won an Oscar for playing Salieri, Mozart's rival, somebody absolutely angered with him because of his talent, and yet he's a womanizer and a drunkard and a party animal, but nonetheless. American Graffiti, which is directed by George Lucas before he did Star Wars. It's a movie a lot of people may forget about, not even know George Lucas directed. And it has a lot of young stars like Ron Howard, Harrison Ford, Richard Dreyfuss. It's very, very good, very nostalgic. Then we have one of two movies from Russian director Tarkovsky, Andrei Rublev, which is a film not a lot of people have seen. It took me a while to find it as well and watch it, but after I watched it, it instantly became one of my favorites. There's a Hungarian movie, Anje Vera, which also is very hard to find, but it's a very, very good film. Woody Allen's Annie Hall. I have a lot of Woody Allen movies on the list. I love Woody Allen. Annie Hall is one of his best films and one of his most famous ones. The Apartment, one of many films from Billy Wilder with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. Very, very mature, very, very funny comedy. Apocalypse Now from Francis Ford Coppola, another great war movie, very dark and disturbing and strange, and not something that's really straightforward, as most war movies are. Then there's the Apu trilogy from an Indian director named Satyajit Ray. These were movies made in the 1950s. I don't believe they're in a DVD collection, but I wish they were, because I'd like to have them all. I don't have any of them at the moment, but I have seen them all. Then we have The Awful Truth, a great screwball comedy from 1937. And that's all for the A's. Into the B's, the first one is Bambi, one of my favorite Disney movies. I watched this when I was a kid, and have loved it ever since. The Battleship Potemkin, another Eisenstein movie, very influential, a silent film from 1925. Beauty and the Beast, this is a 1946 French movie from Jean Cocteau. It's not the animated movie from 1990, even though I really love that movie too. But this movie's entirely different, very surreal, very artistic. And plus it's in black and white with subtitles, so your kids won't be as enthralled by it as they were by the Disney version. Then comes Being John Malkovich, which is one of the strangest and funniest movies I've ever seen. I highly recommend it. Then there's the 15-and-a-half-hour Berlin Alexanderplatz from Fassbinder from 1980. I watched it in 3-hour segments. I didn't watch it from beginning to end. I don't think anybody could. And if you could, then I applaud you. The Best Years of Our Lives is next from 1946 by William Wyler, about soldiers returning from World War II and readjusting to their lives and society and their families. Very, very good film. The Bicycle Thief from Vittorio De Sica, an Italian movie from 1948. Incidentally, the first foreign film I ever saw, and I loved it. Very simple, very poignant. The Big Parade, another very rare film I watched on TCM. It's a silent movie from 1925 from King Vidor about World War I, and it's also a movie I would consider one of the greatest war films ever made. It's followed by The Big Sleep, with Humphrey Bogart playing Philip Marlowe in one of his iconic detective roles, directed by Howard Hawks. Then we have Birth of a Nation, a very controversial movie, explicitly racist, but incredibly influential and very successful when it came out in 1915. Then we have Blade Runner from Ridley Scott, one of the best sci-fi movies I've ever seen, and I know people who hated it, but I think its vision of the future is very bleak, but very brilliant and very stylized, and so that's one reason why I like it so much. Then we have Boogie Nights from Paul Thomas Anderson about the porn industry in the 1970s. And this movie is, really, of course, for mature audiences only, but it's very compelling, very fascinating, full of all sorts of graphic stuff, but that should be pretty obvious. Then we have Bonnie and Clyde, one of the great gangster movies with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway as the Depression-era criminals. Followed by Breathless from Jean-Luc Godard, a French movie. One of these high art house films that a lot of people may not like. I really don't like Godard either, but this movie is really brilliant, and I will concede to that, even though I really don't like much else he ever did. The Bride of Frankenstein, which I think is superior to the original movie. This one featuring Elsa Lanchester in the iconic role, in the title character. Bridge on the River Kwai, another great war movie about people in a Japanese POW camp who build a bridge over the River Kwai, as the title implies, directed by the great British director David Lean. Bringing Up Baby, another great screwball comedy from 1938 by Howard Hawks with Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. Broken Blossoms, a film from 1919 by D.W. Griffith, better I think than Birth of a Nation, but a lot harder to find. Again, I saw it on TCM and tracked down my own copy, and I suggest you do that too. Bullets Over Broadway, another one of my favorite Woody Allen movies, with Diane Wiest, in a role that won her an Oscar. And finally, Bulworth, one of the greatest political satires I've ever seen from Warren Beatty. Incredibly clever, smart, and very funny. I've seen it dozens of times, and it's just as funny the 12th time as it is the first time. So those are the A's and B's on my list. Later I'll talk about the C's and the D's, and we'll get through the list eventually unless people find these videos to be completely pointless. But I'll see you later.